Hello, Garland Nixon here, and we are with Larry Johnson. We're going to talk about Iran. We're going to talk about Ukraine and all kinds of stuff. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here, and we are hanging out with Larry Johnson. We got a lot going on. We got Trump has been talking with Benjamin Netanyahu. We're speculating what that may be about. And of course, Larry has on his website, sonar21.com. That's sonar21.com. Larry has already begun covering that, and he's got a great article. Why are the U.S. and Israel obsessed with eliminating Iran's ballistic missiles? Before we get to that, Larry, let's start with the meeting. What do you think about the meeting with Netanyahu? Have you heard any rumors? What are your thoughts?
Well, I thought in advance that this was going to be either final coordination for an attack, or they would have been there to sort of celebrate having launched the attack. But what happened was a little different. I fully expected Trump to cave and to basically acquiesce to the demands of an attack on Iran, because the Zionist community is up in arms over Iran. They want a regime change, and they want it now. And I saw, there was I'm friends with a man named Stephen Bryan, and Stephen was he was Undersecretary of Defense under Ronald Reagan. And normally he's a very calm, measured guy. Even though he's a Zionist, he's not like the Smotriches or the Ben-Gvirs. He's not crazy in that vein, but writes very measured. But boy, he was hot under the collar after the meeting last week between Iran and the United States in I guess it was Oman in Muscat. And when I see someone like him get that upset, I could only assume that was only a taste of what Trump was getting from the other Zionists that surround him. But it looks like Trump held his own. And the really curious part, though, was that Bibi he came armed this time with briefing charts and with his defense colleagues from the Israeli Defense Ministry and the intelligence organizations to make the case about, oh my God, these ballistic missiles, they're a huge threat. We got to get rid of them. Which is why I wrote that piece, because the narrative as of last June, the 12-day war, was that Israel and the United States, we shot down over 90% of those missiles. Hardly anything got through. Well, that is absolutely.
Larry's frozen.
Wouldn't have been saying on needing to get rid of ballistic missiles. In fact, the kind of damage that so let's do some reverse math. In just Tel Aviv alone, in one neighborhood, 480 homes, residences, apartment buildings were damaged because of the strikes. Now, they claim that the United States and Israel shot down 90%. So 10% got through. That's 458. So you see where I'm going with this. All of a sudden, you're saying you shot down over 3,000 missiles? It's, like I said, the math doesn't add up. What happened was most of the ballistic missiles got through in last June. and did significant damage. But the war got called off early, and Iran, in my opinion now, foolishly agreed to a plea from the United States to stop the war in place, not fire anymore, let the United States run this, obliterate the nuclear sites up north, Fordo, and then Iran would be allowed to bomb, hit a missile, shoot a missile at Al Udeid Air Force Base, and would call it quits. And Iran, for whatever reason, they agreed to do that. But they've now made it clear if the hostilities start again, if they're attacked again, they ain't stopping. They're not going to stop until there's the United States pleads, basically surrenders. And I think that if Trump is stupid enough to start this war, he could very well find himself in a situation where he'd be having to ask for terms from Iran in order to stop the carnage.
Yeah, I'm with you. I was with everyone, with a lot of people who felt like it at first, well, it's going to happen. But in recent weeks, I felt like, and not that I think that the leadership of our country is rational, but I don't think they're completely insane. And I looked at it and I thought, if I can figure it out, I couldn't come up with a scenario where it wasn't catastrophic economically, militarily, even if Iran wasn't as strong as we thought or whatever, still they're strong enough to hurt you bad. And they close the Straits of Hormuz, and even if they don't, just because the fact there's a war there, even if they don't close it, the insurance companies will close it, because I used to work in the insurance industry a bit. And all insurance policies always say the same thing. Nothing's covered in a war zone. If you're in life insurance, is not covered in a war zone. Your home insurance, if it's a war zone, nothing is covered in a war zone. And if the Straits of Hormuz was a war zone, then any ship sailing through there anyway has no insurance, and they can't afford to do it. So it would be any way that this happened is going to be catastrophic economically for the U.S. at a time when our markets are almost ready to crash anyway.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. In fact, Iran doesn't actually have to close the Straits of Hormuz. All it has to do is say, we're going to close it. And the insurance rates will then skyrocket right off the bat. So maybe somebody might insure a ship at an exorbitant rate. So it won't be viable economically. What concerns me, and I got to figure out a way to try to express this in a way that people understand. I had a conversation, or I listened in on a conversation on Tuesday. I'm part of this group, the Zoom call, and there was a new member that was invited. He's a retired 3-star admiral. And I'm not going to mention his name, but, Naval Academy graduate. He's actually had extensive experience in the Middle East. He sort of grew up as a kid in one of those countries. I'm not going to name the country, because if I name the country, people could probably figure out who this is. And he said the most nonsensical crap that I'm sitting there shaking my head, because he genuinely, he wasn't lying. He wasn't spinning. He genuinely believed this. And this is what he said. Oh yeah, we're going to go in there and we will take out those Iranian missiles with our airstrikes. And I'm thinking, didn't we just have an event in the Red Sea 8 months ago, March, or now it's 10 months ago? Hell, 11, excuse me, I can't add. 11 months ago, Operation Rough Rider, where the United States with 2 aircraft carriers was trying to stop the Houthis from interfering with shipping. And as part of that, we were searching for these mobile missiles that they had, that they were firing, and trying to destroy them. And in the course of trying to do that, we lost one Predator drone per week to the tune of $35 million a piece, because those drones were flying over Yemen looking for these mobile missile platforms. And then if they could find one, they tried to shoot it before they got shot down. Now, and the Houthis didn't have advanced air defense systems at all, but they still managed to shoot down 7 Predator drones and may have shot down at least one F-18A. And I'm thinking, so we did that for 7 weeks with 2 aircraft carriers and failed, utterly failed to stop the Houthis from firing missiles. So now we're supposed to believe that with 1 aircraft carrier and with all of our airfields in the area going to be under attack, that we're going to be able to fly over Iran, locate all these missile sites, and destroy them? I mean, I'm thinking, how can you be so divorced from reality to say that crap and believe it? It's nonsensical. Because when you start sketching out an actual battle plan, how are we going to accomplish this objective? We don't have a magical system for locating where mobile missile platforms are. We just don't have that. And on top of it, a lot of the missiles that Iran has are stored underground. When you go to some of like the AI platforms and ask, how many missiles Iran has, they'll give you something like, they had 3,500 and they shot 1,000, so they're down to 2,500. Where'd you get that? Oh, that's what Israel told us. Israel is pulling information out of its ass. It does not know. And I would argue that Iran, with 18 different varieties of missiles and having built underground cities, and not just a hole, but I mean massive complexes. And I've seen some of the videos. It would not shock me at all if they've got over 15 to 20,000 such missiles, and they've got 18 variants. So if the United States pursues this, as you were saying at the outset, it's going to be devastating economically, militarily, politically for Trump. Now, those that hate Trump would say, great, let's do it. That'll do him in. But this could be such a consequential engagement that it would mark the end of the U.S. strategic doctrine. Because right now our strategic doctrine is this triad based upon the sea power, which is the aircraft carriers for projecting force, the planes and space, and then the ground forces. But what happens when all of a sudden weapons are now developed that can strike aircraft carriers, and the traditional method of putting up a defensive screen using destroyers, it no longer works? Because with the advent of drones and then the right number of ballistic missiles, you can literally overwhelm the defensive capabilities, to force them to deplete what they have to fire, and then those aircraft carriers, they're completely vulnerable, or they're forced to stay more than 1,000 miles offshore, which sort of defeats the purpose, because those aircraft, the jets on the aircraft carriers, they've got a range of about 1,200 miles before they need to be refueled. And the last thing you want to have is refuelers flying into a combat zone, because they're big fat targets. So I mean, like I said, none of this adds up, and yet we're pretending that it's still the 20th century, and nobody has hypersonic missiles.
Yeah, well, we have to hope that Russia or China haven't given them any of their missiles that exceed 1,000 miles, or we don't necessarily even know what Iran has. You know what I mean? That's the other thing. We don't know how much they've played their hand. For all we know, we could say, oh, they've got this missile, that missile. And countries tend to have certain things that they're not going to tell you they have. For all we know, Iran could have an anti-shipping missile that's with a 1,500-mile range. We don't know, but they've just never told us. So you're taking a chance even then that they may have some things that they've kept close to the, close to their belt just in case they needed them. These are unnecessary chances.
Yeah, it is. I was just pulling up the list here because Iran has quite a stock. Let's see, they've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 what are called short-range ballistic missiles. They operate between 300 kilometers. Okay, so that's what, 160 miles. Let's see, 180 miles to upwards of 700. And they've got one that does 1,000 kilometers. Okay, so 600 miles. Then they've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 medium-range ballistic missiles that go between 600 miles and 2,000 miles. And then they've got 2 other long-range systems. One's called the Fatah, and the other is the Qadr. And they range out much farther. So, you've got a real ballistic missile threat. It's not just one thing. And on top of it, I don't think, if this thing goes hot, I suspect that one of the tactics that the Iranians will employ is they will deploy duds, or they'll deploy decoys. Just like remember, Patton had this imaginary army that he commanded in England in order to fool the Germans, make him think that that was where the invasion was coming from at Pas-de-Calais. So Iran could do a very similar thing, do some deception, and force us to use a limited inventory of our air-to-ground missiles being launched from F-35s at targets that we think are real and turn out not to be. I mean, hell, that happened during the war in Serbia and Yugoslavia 25 years ago. So my point is, we've gotten accustomed to this. We run an imaginary war in Venezuela and are taking a victory lap, pretending that we really accomplished something great. Whereas, we lost in Afghanistan, we essentially lost in Iraq. And now we're going up against a country that, while they're not necessarily a peer, they have the wherewithal to really do some damage to us because we're trying to project force that we really.
There's freezing a little, at least on mine end.
Those bases could be obliterated.
Oh, sorry about that. You were freezing just a little on my end.
Yeah.
I hope, but it may not even have been for everyone else. But yeah, and the thing about Trump, our president is, we have not really faced an opponent like this.
Right.
We have not, since World War II, faced an opponent that had the ability to really do some serious damage to us, and which means high casualties. Americans, if 10 casualties came in, Americans would hit the ceiling. Right. You start talking about ballistic missiles, you start talking about 300 men on this ship, 200 on that ship,
5,000 on an aircraft carrier.
Yeah. So you're talking about serious, you're talking about lose. And here's the other thing. Okay, if I was Iran, in the region, I would all of your air bases first. That's what you're going to use to attack me. And I'm going to put my hypersonic missiles, everything I can, on your air bases and on the big Bahrain where the 6th Fleet is, that port. Before I even touch any of your other bases, those are the strategic targets that you use to launch, that your ships come from. You reload your ship, you refuel your ships in Bahrain. And of course, your planes are landing. I'm going to try my best for days to flatten every one of those so you won't have anywhere to fly from.
Yeah.
Okay. Whatever happens, you've lost your air bases and your ports in the region. You've kind of ejected yourself from the region. At that point, whatever happens, you don't have strategic assets in the region anymore.
Yeah. Well,
to some extent, you've already lost. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And on top of it, hey, the Chinese have already provided satellite imagery, and they made it public. And one of the reasons I think China is doing that is to put the United States on notice, like to say, we're not fucking around. If we're going to help Iran if you dare do this. And I think that also may actually be a factor in Trump's decisions about maybe we want to see if we can get this negotiation underway. And this is going to be the ultimate irony. If the Iranians are willing to sign an agreement that they will allow full inspections of their nuclear sites so they can verify that they're not building a nuke, and they'll limit enrichment of uranium, and agree that if they need something that's 60% for medical research, medical isotopes, they'll get it from Russia or China, provided all economic sanctions are lifted. Now, Trump is going to be under enormous pressure not to accept that deal, because Israel, they want regime change, but they're not going to get it. This was that other part of delusion I was listening to from this retired admiral who was, talking about how the population in Iran is rising up, and they want to get rid of the mullahs. I talked with Nima and with Professor Morandi, actually 3 times over the last week, and it's just not true. And Nima, I trust. He's not an ideologue of any sort. I mean, he's just he's an engineering professor, a science professor, and so he looks at data, and he stand back and looks at it objectively, and he was like, looking at all these reports coming out claiming that there was massive unrest and dissatisfaction with the mullahs, simply not true. And one of the things that this guy was citing is about, the terrible state of the economy. Yeah, whose fault is that? We've been doing everything in our power to destroy the Iranian economy, and now, because they've joined BRICS, and because Russia and China have declared they're not going to abide by any sanctions against Iran, Iran's economy is going to start coming out of it. But again, we saw, here's Trump saying any country that trades with Iran is going to get 25% tariffs. Well, that means he's going to continue to impose tariffs on China and Russia. And they're not putting up with it.
Yeah, I think the only thing that Trump could get in reality, that the U.S. could get now, is basically, the way I'll put it is to go back in the JCPOA.
Yeah.
But in order to do that, even Iran then is saying, we will only do that if you'll drop all the sanctions. And I think would that require Congress to drop the sanctions or not?
No, I don't think so. I think it is within the power of the president to lift them.
But he'd have to deal with the Zionists, which they, tear limb from limb. That ain't within the power of the president. They probably got some more Epstein files that they're wiggling around over his head. That's the other part of it. But I think that's the only option, which puts Trump in was it a 10-card hole or whatever it is? Because if he knows if he attacks Iran, I think Trump knows by now, if he attacks Iran, his goose is cooked. His presidency is finished. That's it. It's political suicide. All the other things that are going to happen, but he's finished if he does that for so many reasons. But that if he doesn't, he has to kind of take the deal, and the deal's nothing but the JCPOA. So he has to decide who he's going to take the heat from. I'll say this: if he walks away, his supporters, and some of them who did support him and maybe don't, and what have you, may say, okay, well, Trump, you're doing the right thing. He'll get a pat on the back from his supporters, whether he cares about them or not, I don't know. But I don't see a lot of options for Donald Trump, because attacking is political suicide.
Yeah, actually, though, if he does, let's say, walk away from Israel,
yes,
which is, I think it's unlikely. I just watched him a little bit ago, and he's the most popular president that Israel's ever had. And so I don't see him walking away. But if his advisors sit him down and say, let's look at the polls, let's look at what's happened to your MAGA base. The anger at you for making Israel great again over making America great again is deep, wide, and very negative. And so if he is seen as signing a deal, I've secured a deal that's going to protect Israel from a nuclear weapon, even though the Zionists won't be happy with that. I think it'd be pretty easy to sell that. And we've stayed out of war with Iran. And so there's some ways it could be, he could actually turn around some of his political problems. But I think, as you do, he's just too heavily invested in the Zionist project to step back and do something, do the right thing.
So in other words, it's like the old tiger by the tail, right? You can't hold on and you can't let go. He can attack him because he'll be destroyed politically, and he could go down as the first president to lose an aircraft carrier and, or an aircraft carrier group destroyed, or the president who got the U.S. smashed to bits in the Middle East, things like that, right? So he can't do that. He can't walk away because God only knows the Zionists will tear him limb for limb. So he can't attack. He can't not attack, and he can't do anything in between. I wouldn't want to be in Donald Trump's shoes. Well, I couldn't be, because they'd rub me out. I'd get JFK'd before I even got in office. But you get my point. It's a situation where you don't know what to think, because he has to attack him, but he can't.
Yeah. Well, and it's again, how are we going to attack? What are we going to do? We don't have a single instance of regime change in the last 100 years, 120 years, where the regime change was accomplished without putting troops on the ground, inserting troops. Remember during World War, well, neither of us remember, we weren't around, but what we've read with respect to World War II is that the 8th Air Force and the British counterpart to that, they believed that they could by bombing Germany, they would win the war, that we could win the war strictly through air power. That turned out not to be true at all. So it is that we're still in, what we're left with now is relying on air power to do something that it has never been able to do, and a weak naval force that they're staying, my understanding is they're staying about 1,000 miles plus offshore. They don't want to get too close to Iran because of the missile threat. Okay, that's fine, except they got those Tomahawks loaded on those destroyers that, got 3 destroyers, and their goal was to fire some of those Tomahawk cruise missiles into Iran to, destroy the missile bases, except those missiles only have a range of 1,000 miles. So, if you're 1,000 miles offshore and you fire the missile that only goes 1,000 miles, you'll reach beachfront. That's about it. So that's what I say. There's a disconnect in terms of the force package. You cannot accomplish what they claim. What they claim they want to do is, we're going to locate where all these missiles are. And according to Alistair Crook, they got at least 57 different sites spread around Iran, which is a big country. And they're underground. So good luck with that. And then on top of it, Iran's got what Alistair described as a dead hand system. So even if the Iranian leadership is killed, those missiles are still going to be fired. So the West, there will not be a reprieve. And I personally believe that if it goes to this, we'll see Haifa and Tel Aviv destroyed. They'll be getting the Gaza treatment.
I think you're right. And at that point, what were you doing? At that point, you ask yourself and you say, okay, what were we doing again? We were there to, to create a circumstance where the U.S. and Israel dominates in the region. but you're hurt so bad economically that you ain't dominating even in your own region. You know what I mean? Not even at home. You can't even go home. You can't go out in the streets of Washington, D.C. because the people go bananas because the potential, there's this thing cuts two ways. You want to dominate the oil rich region of the world because then you can cut other people off and choke other people out and all these things. I understand it, disagree with it. But when you start fighting and causing chaos in that region, you might cut yourself off. You might cut so much oil off that your already extremely brittle economy that's on the edge, it won't take but that much. And as a president in America, man, you wake up tomorrow on any given day and it's $7, $8, $9, $10 a gallon. People will go. I mean, you know how Americans are.
Yeah.
If people looked up, they're like, it's $8 a gallon. They would look at Washington and say, whatever you're doing, stop it. And what happens when they say, but even if we stop it, it won't fix it. There's no way to fix this one. They ain't coming back down.
Yeah. It's that or the thing that they woke up in California.
Yeah, right.
Oh my God.
Exactly.
Yeah. But no, you're right. And that's, his foreign policy is coming is coming unraveled on a whole variety of fronts, and that includes what's happening with Russia, because Russia over the past week, they have shifted their tune dramatically, with Lavrov saying, you know what, it's moving. Our relations with the U.S. are moving in the wrong direction. That's not a good sign. So this. And plus, you have both Russia and China. They are poised to launch their annual joint naval military exercise with Iran. That's supposed to take place sometime, if not this week, in the next couple of weeks. And you've already got a Chinese intelligence ship shadowing the Abraham Lincoln, the carrier. And the Chinese apparently have got a couple of destroyers alongside it to protect that ship. So the Chinese and Russians are going to have a naval presence in the area, and both have been supplying. We don't have this specific list, but there have been an enormous number of transport aircraft flying in and out of Tehran and other spots in Iran, delivering materiel from China and Russia. So they're not going to stand back and just, let the United States do this and shrug their shoulders and say, "Oh, those crazy Americans, what can we do?" No, they're in this to do what they can behind the scenes to stop this from happening. But if it does go hot, then they're going to be ready to move in and dramatically increase their support to Iran. Iran will not be alone this time.
Well, it's when you look at Sergei Lavrov, he recently did a I think it was RT. He also did another one for NTV, but in Russia. But when you look at what he said, very serious stuff, because it was substantive. It wasn't just, I'm mad because the U.S. did this last week. He brought up that they had a deal in Alaska, and they felt the only thing the United States, here's what he said, that it only needed to be announced. They said, in Alaska, we came close to an agreement, hoping that since the Russian leader ultimately accepted the American leader's proposal, so they accepted it, it could simply be announced, and many issues would be resolved much more quickly. But unfortunately, time is ticking. So he goes on to talk about that and says, we had a deal, and all we had to do was say, hey, here's the deal. And they left, and we thought we had a deal. And then they added sanctions to us instead of they proposed the deal. We said yes and said, okay, well, let's do this. And instead of going by the deal that they proposed, they simply added sanctions.
Yeah. Well, since last Thursday is when he did the Rick Sanchez show with RT. Then on Monday, he did BRICS TV. Tuesday, he did NTV, the Russian channel. And then yesterday, he did the Duma. This is unprecedented. Over the last, since this special military operation started, we've never seen Lavrov do this kind of speaking in public and he's not sending different. He's given basically the same message, which is the United States hasn't followed through on what it promised to do. BRICS is coming into its own. The traditional colonial empires that built themselves on conquering other countries and enslaving people, that's coming unraveled. And we're going to pursue our own interests. That's the bottom line. So they're not sitting around waiting for the United States to call and ask them out on a date. Okay. They've decided they're going to start dating other people. And, you know, if Trump wakes up and decides, oh, maybe I want to give Russia a call and see if they want to go to dinner, Russia will be saying, sorry, we got other plans. You know, put it in relationship terms like that. There's not everything that Trump has done, despite his words of agreement with Putin in person, all the other actions are hostile towards Russia. There's not a single action in which the United States has said, let's relieve you of sanctions, let's return your money, let's have direct flights back and forth between our countries. None of that.
You know, he brings up, when he talks about Ukraine now, he's bringing up how many times they've been had. He brings up, I read one of his interviews, he brings up the Minsk Accords, he brings up every single thing, and he basically says, look, we have a set of, and I'm paraphrasing, but not by much, we have a set of demands that will not change.
Mm-hmm.
And if these are not met, there's going to be no deal. It's clear the position of the Russians are, look, this is what we're going to do. And all of this talk about making deals, being close to a deal, might have a deal. There are going to be no deals here. Our demands will be met, or we'll meet them ourselves.
Well, the Russians, I think, have been a bit naive. Now, I was fortunate just about a year ago now, sitting across the table from Mr. Lavrov, along with Judge Napolitano and Mario Nafal. And, you know, Lavrov was very upfront. He said, look, we had a deal. We accepted Ukraine's proposal for ending the special military operation in April of 2022. We signed off on it. We had basic agreements about the troop levels that Ukraine would have, about what to do about NATO. You know, he went down the entire list, and he said, but they then walked away under pressure from the West. So what are we going to do?
I think Larry's frozen a little bit, but he'll be right back. At least on my side.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Hate StreamYard.
Yeah.
I only have these problems with StreamYard.
Happens sometimes.
But he was out speaking at the behest, at the direction of Vladimir Putin. Now, can I prove that? No. But I don't. This is not Lavrov going out on it. He's not freelancing. And he's not just saying, oh, this is what I think, so I'm going to just go out and say, no. This is Putin's putting him out front to be the bad cop. Leaving where Putin can still be the good cop if necessary. But, you know, the one thing I would warn the Russians about, that Trump is not driving this train. This is a deep state movement in destroying Russia, breaking it apart, and ultimately going after China. They have not, the CIA has not backed off of that, and Trump's not able to tell them stop. And here's all I call circumstantial evidence. Why did Donald Trump suddenly call Pashinyan of Armenia and Aliyev of Azerbaijan to Washington, D.C. last year to sign a peace agreement? Because the man didn't even know where those two countries were. I mean, if you would have put a gun to his head and said, okay, show me where Armenia and Azerbaijan, as he called it, are located, he couldn't do it. Where did that come from? That was not even some secret State Department ploy. This had deeper roots, I believe, with the CIA. And then what did we have in the last 5 days? J.D. Vance, Vice President J.D. Vance, shows up in Armenia, Yerevan, and Baku, Azerbaijan. Why? I mean, we don't have some great trade relations with those countries. There's nothing that they produce that we need. They don't have major voting blocks in the United States. What the hell's going on? And that's where Russia needs to look and say, the United States is here in order to, again, they're going to use those countries as platforms for subversion in Russia. I don't know what specific plans there are, but this is being driven by the CIA, and Trump's not in control of that. So I think that's the other thing that Russia needs to realize. It doesn't matter what you negotiate with Donald Trump. Meaningless. Because Trump is not in charge. There's something more nefarious afoot.
I agree. Well, here's something else that I think is telling. So one of the things that Lavrov said was he talked about the regime in Kiev. He says which is, to me, that the whole time they're talking about a deal, that I'm thinking this too, a regime that has banned Russian language in all spheres and legally encourages the ideology and practice of Nazism, including ritual torchlight processions and other satanic rituals, will remain. So they want to provide security guarantees specifically to this regime. And I felt like that the Trump administration's ahead of them. Well, let's talk about security guarantees. Let's talk about this and that. And just like we said, you haven't even given the Russians their property back here. You haven't even said we're going to have direct flights from the United States to Russia. And you've got a regime in there that says you can't even speak Russian and you can't even go to a Russian Orthodox church. Right. And you're going to pretend like you're close to a deal. And you have a regime that will not ideologically in any way, shape, and form say, all right, we're going to respect Russian speakers. No, they hate them and they want to kill all Russians. And that pretty much reflects the way the political class in Europe feels, I might add.
Yeah, no, it's Russia's only solution is to win this on the battlefield. And it's not that I'm looking for more death and destruction, but that's the West cannot be trusted to negotiate an agreement. Let's say that Putin and Trump agree on something. Well, that doesn't mean that Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal are going to accept that agreement. Unless Trump says, okay, let me put a treaty before the Senate, they got to get 2/3 of a vote, 2/3 of the senators to vote on that treaty. I don't think it can be done simple majority. That's not going to happen. There is not the political support within this ruling class right now to say, let's normalize relations with Russia. Let's start treating Russia as an equal, as a friend. Oh, hell no. We got too many people lusting after Russia's resources. So that's why I say Russia just needs to say, you know what, this isn't going to work. It's just, it's like if you've ever been in a relationship with somebody, and as much as you hope that they'd change and you hope that they'd, stop the drinking and stop the drug use and, clean their act up, stop sleeping around with the neighborhood, you realize that it's not going to happen. And so at that point, I'm walking away. I'm going a different direction. That's what Russia needs to do. And I think they've started to put the West on notice that Dnipropetrovsk, Poltava, Sumy, Kharkiv, that's coming under Russian control. And Russia will incorporate them into the Russian Federation as well. So Ukraine is going to lose the eastern half of its country, the country that's located east of the Dnieper River, and they'll lose Odessa, and they'll be landlocked. Ukraine will be a country without a future.
And right now, I think Ukraine is already a country without a future because I think it's a Stone Age country, and I mean it by this. Remember you'd see things of these people in bars and restaurants in Kiev and Lvov and going to the nightclub, shaking around, and sports cars driving up and down the road streets and the avenues of Kiev. There's no electricity and it ain't coming back. And what little areas, I don't think the Russians are going to stop until there's no electricity. There, not anywhere, not in the winter, not in the summer, that you will have a country that's completely de-electrified, and you're just going to have to continue to fight with that your people are going to have to live with no electricity. And I understand the Russians doing that. I mean, this is war. That's the way the ball bounces in a war.
Yeah. Well, and Putin's under pressure from many members of the Duma to declare it as a war. Stop this special military operation nonsense. Let's go full hog. Let's go to war. Let's mobilize the country. Let's mass our resources, and let's crush this. And frankly, I really believe that's the only way out, because the propaganda here in the United States against Russia is so profound, so widespread, that people, they're predisposed to see Russia as an enemy, just in the same way with respect to Iran, and that there's no way we could accept a peace agreement with them.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you, Larry. Once again, hold on here. I want to make sure I remind everybody that Larry has a website, and the website is Sonar 21. That's sonar21.com, son of a new American revolution, and where all of his stuff is, all of Larry's, he has guest writers and just has all kind of good stuff on there. And wait a minute. There we go. And I got to remind everyone here, you can support through PayPal, PayShoot, Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, right up there under support us. So make sure, if you can, you support Larry, because this stuff's expensive. And as you know, most of the people that are doing this aren't making very much. They're just getting by, but this is important work. Let me ask you this, Larry, and I don't know if it's something you want to comment on. You can tell me if you know. Did you see Pam Bondi the other day?
Oh my God.
She looked like a fool. And one of the few decent people in Congress, in my opinion, Massey, Tom, and they attacked this guy. I don't have to agree with Massey on everything. I don't know anybody agree with everything, but he seems like a decent person who kind of wants to do the right thing. Trump attacks him, and Bondi's just, I didn't know much about her, but she looks like an incompetent lunatic to me.
Yeah, she is. I grant you that. She is. She has been. She's part of the problem. She needs to be fired.
Yeah.
But again, she was put in that position for one reason. She's another Israel firster. Just as Kash Patel is. This is all about protecting Israel. This whole Jeffrey Epstein affair primarily revolves around a Mossad operation that went bad. And I maybe you know this. Did Michael Baden, he's done the autopsies. Did he actually get to physically inspect Epstein's body, or did he just examine the autopsy results?
That I don't know, because it's starting to look more and more like Epstein did, which don't surprise me.
Yeah.
And I would even bet Ghislaine Maxwell's not in any prison. She's probably over on the beaches of the Mediterranean, and they fly her back over here every now and then to pretend like she's in prison.
Yeah, I think there is a high probability that either Epstein was murdered, but the problems with some of the autopsy photos, or some of the photos of him being taken into the emergency room, different ear, different nose.
Yes.
So you got to go, huh? Was this staged in order to get him out and take him out of the limelight? But still, the Trump administration is going through great lengths, with the full help of people like Kash Patel and Dan Bongino and Pam Bondi, to cover it up, to obscure evidence of people that should be in prison, that should have been charged. Now, they've got enough evidence there to charge people. They're just not doing it. They're not bringing it to a grand jury. Lex Wexner is listed as a co-conspirator, and he was alleged to have had a homosexual relationship with Epstein. I mean, Epstein was hitting from both sides of the plate,
right?
But this is what Bondi did was disgraceful, absolutely disgraceful.
and just embarrassing. I mean, at least have some argument or something. She like brought in something. Oh yes, look at this. You did this. What happened in your area? And this was she had like, this was a so and so. This was a guy who was in your area, and you didn't prosecute him, and he was illegal alien. And I thought, what the hell does that have to do with what you're there talking about? Yeah. You're having a conversation about Epstein. You have no defense. You've got a bunch of witnesses there sticking their hands up. Hey, we called the FBI and they didn't do it. They'll sit there like, well, we interviewed everybody we could. Okay, we got a bunch of witnesses here. Did they interview you? No. Did you call them? Yeah. Did they call you back? No. Yeah. They look at her. Oh, hey, here's a picture of an illegal alien. You made yourself look. I mean, at this point, just quit and resign and leave, because you've humiliated yourself. You've disgraced. No, excuse me. She has disgraced herself. She'd have been better off to sit down and just been quiet. Yeah. And just says, I'm not sure. Oh, I'll have to look into that or something.
Yeah. Not a single person who was involved in the conspiracy to keep Donald Trump out of office in 2016, has been arrested or charged. Not one. I mean, and they've got clear. Anthony Fauci lied under oath to Congress. They're not bringing him. They're not doing anything. So, yeah, I'm
nothing.
I regret having supported Donald Trump. I really do. And that doesn't mean I wanted to have Kamala Harris. I mean, that's right. That's like the choice between, you want to have your right arm cut off or your left arm cut off. I'd like to keep them both if I could. But it is Trump. Trump is just making a complete disaster of his presidency.
Larry, I'll say this. We're just about out of time, but I'll say this. What I'm seeing here is that, this is the worst part of it. When somebody finally, like you were saying, the person keeps saying to their brother, please, would you stop, yelling and fighting and gambling all their money away and all that stuff to his husband, and she's arguing with him, and he keeps saying, he gets paid, he goes straight, gambles the money away, drinks it up, chases the women, does all that stuff. And when he comes home and she ain't mad at him anymore, he's in trouble. She's packing her bag. She's at when she ain't, hey, how you doing? Nah, fine, everything's good. Yeah. She's either planning to kill him when he goes to sleep, or she's getting the hell out of there when she stops. I think that's where a lot of people are. I'm like this. Well, Trump can't go after the people who were Russiagators. Why? That started in London. The very same people who did Russiagate are the Epstein, or that would lead straight to Epstein. They can't release some of those files because I bet you names like Seth Rich will be all over them. Yeah. Names Russiagate, Stefan Halper. In fact, it's already coming out that Epstein was sending stuff about Stefan Halper. He's a great guy. He was in the middle of going after Trump. So he can't touch Russiagate because Epstein's fingerprints are all over it. And when you start to look at it, you're saying, he can't touch anything. Yeah. He can't touch Fauci. You look at Epstein, and he and Bill Gates are like, yes, sir, we got to get ready for these pandemics. He can't touch them because Epstein's names and all of this stuff is a devious, evil, diabolical cabal that runs from Tel Aviv to London to Washington, D.C., which means that Trump can't touch any of it and won't. And they can't interview those people because they will incriminate the people they'll incriminate the system, and they can't let people find out about the system. So this is a hell of a mess.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, what the real oddity and irony is that Mossad was actively involved in Russiagate against Trump. Even though Trump is allegedly the best friend Israel's ever had. But Bibi Netanyahu was making sure, the Israelis played a major role in helping try to entrap George Papadopoulos. So this is, yeah, you're right. This ain't going away. And it's a big mess. And if we attack Iran, it's only going to add, be putting another log on the fire.
Throwing a 55-gallon drum of gasoline on the fire at that point. Yeah. Well, thanks a lot, Larry. Everybody, before we go, let me remind you one more time where you need to go for all your information, and that is sonar21.com. That's sonar21.com. That's Larry's great website, and that's all of the info he's got going. Look at that. He's got announcements there and more, and you may have missed some of these great articles. but there's plenty more there. And of course, as I also said, make sure you can do PayPal, Patreon, buy me a coffee. And don't forget, buy me a coffee. Some people don't trust Patreon or any of them for that matter. But when you do buy me a coffee, you can also do it just like Patreon. You can say, I want to make it one time, or you can make it monthly. Buy me a coffee gives you that opportunity now. So make sure you go to sonar21.com, do everything you can, keep Larry, continuing in all this important work. Thanks a lot, Larry.
Hey, thanks, brother. I'm gonna have a question.
Man.
I have a question for you offline.
Okay. All right, everybody. We're out of here. Have a great day. Don't forget, you got everything going down across the bottom there, all of the opportunities and ways that you can support this channel. Make sure you share this on all your social media platforms. We're out.